We're recording the interview of Robert Kellar, Bob. This interview is being conducted by Ericka Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Crown Plaza Hotel in downtown Dayton. It is 9:39 on Tuesday, July 9th, 2019. Hi, Bob.
Good morning.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri on August 4th, 1950.
You got a birthday coming up. Okay.
I think
All right. Any big plans?
I do. Any big plans?
Yeah.
No, not really.
No? Okay. Just
Other than we're holding a reunion this week
Mhm.
For the CCK AB Taichung, Taiwan, where I was stationed back in the early 70s. And we are holding a reunion for those who were stationed there this week here at the Crown Plaza. It's pretty exciting.
So you're kind of celebrating early.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And today is my 48th wedding anniversary.
Get it. That sounds so fun and exciting. And you have Jane here with you, correct?
My wife is here, and her name is Jane.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Excuse me.
I kind of know that because I've met the fabulous Jane already.
Oh,
Yes, I have.
I think she is.
Okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Well, my dad was a baker.
Mm-hmm.
He worked with his dad in a bakery shop in St. Louis, Missouri. It was called Kellar's Fine Pastries. And my dad started baking when he was 12 years old underneath the authority of my grandfather. And that's his background. So he served as a baker for most of his life.
So it was a family-owned bakery.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to bake at all?
I tried it when I was a teenager. Didn't really like it. It wasn't my cup of tea, so to speak.
Okay. And your mom?
My mom was worked at McDonnell Douglas most of her life up until she retired out of Long Beach, California. Eventually, my family moved to California, Orange County, California, a little city called Garden Grove. And my dad was a baker at Knoxberry Farm in Breda Park.
Boysenberry pie?
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I miss boysenberry pie. I too am a California native, so okay.
Yes.
We won't go into that.
No, that's okay. And then my mother worked at McDonnell Douglas, which is now Boeing, in Long Beach, California. Worked with that company building airplanes. She was some kind of secretarial staff or something like that. Yeah.
So Dad caught a nice little filly, so to speak.
Yeah, my childhood was, my mom and dad took care of my brother and I very well.
And is your brother older or younger?
No, he's younger. I'm the oldest.
Okay, and did he also serve in the military?
No, he did not.
Okay, in high school, did you have any passions or groups that you belonged to?
I've always been an airplane buff.
Mm.
In fact, when I was a senior in high school, I took an aviation class, and during that aviation class, the instructor had a old Stearman biplane, and he gave us all an opportunity to be able to fly in it. And when I took my first flight on a biplane, it was built in probably the 30s. That's when all this really started, is becoming an airplane buff, and I've always been interested in airplanes.
Did your mother working at, I want to say Boeing,
McDonnell
but
Douglas,
okay.
yeah.
Did that have anything to do with that, or it was just?
No, not really.
No? Okay. Did you ever get to go to work with your mother?
No.
No? Okay. So what years were you in high school where they had an airplane class?
I was a senior in high school.
But what year was it?
I'm sorry. It was 1967.
Wow. Because, it was the 90s when they, ended wood shop, and home ec classes. They got rid of that. So I'm just they had airplane classes? That is so amazing.
Yeah, it taught us about flight, how airplanes fly, the history of aviation, the Wright brothers, and all of that was taught in that class. It was a 2-semester class.
Oh.
Yeah, it was very extensive.
So how does it feel to be in Dayton, where the Wright brothers invented airplanes? Does that have any significance to you with your passion for planes?
Yeah, I mean, this is the home of the Air Force Museum.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with it, actually.
Have you been here before?
Yeah, I've been here. The first time I came to Dayton was back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were here last October, and then we're here today.
Okay. Okay. So this passion for planes, is that what led you into the Air Force?
Yes.
And when did you join?
I joined in May of 1969.
Willingly?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the draft was going on,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't want to be drafted. I didn't want to go in the Army. I said, if I'm going to go in the military, it's going to be the Air Force.
All right, and that was right after high school, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me about your entry into, walk me through what happened. So you graduate from high school. Do you sit down and have a conversation with mom and dad, or you would already, what happens next? So I'm graduated, mom, dad, I have a passion for planes, I'm going, or what transpires?
I went to my recruiter. I never talked to my mom and dad about it.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I went to the recruiter. I joined up. I came back from what we call the induction station. Now it's called MEPS, Military Entrance Processing Station, in LA, down on Wilshire Boulevard. I came home one afternoon. I said, Mom and Dad, I've joined the Air Force, and I'm leaving next week.
Their response was?
My mom wasn't very happy with me.
Okay.
My dad was okay with it. Naturally, he would be. We had not had anybody in the military in my own immediate family since the 1916, before World War II.
Oh, wow.
So someone in our family going into the military was virtually unheard of. Nobody went in the military in my family. So I was kind of a,
Trailblazer.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
I assume bakers are very calm people.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, my dad could be. I mean, there's a lot of jokes about that, taking things out on the dough,
Okay.
Corny, I know.
Okay. So, are you nervous or scared, or are you just excited and ready to go?
About what?
To go to basic.
Oh, I was scared. I mean, it's the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're going to be facing. People are yelling at you and all of that. I was not really prepared for that, but you did it. It was part of the program. And eventually you got used to it. It was going from a comfort zone to a non-comfort zone, and eventually it became a comfort zone and a new normal for me.
And do you remember anybody or any one specific from basic, or a story you can share?
It was really interesting that the guy I met, because I also worked at Knoxbury Farm, just right after high school. I worked there for about a year. And one of the guys that I worked with at Knoxbury Farm ended up, I did not know it, but ended up joining the Air Force the same time I did. And he and I ended up in basic together.
So that was,
same squadron.
So that's pretty cool. You knew someone.
Yeah, I did, yeah. It was very comforting to know somebody. We ended up going to tech school together.
Okay.
And then after that, we ended up going to our first base together. And we were together up until, the first 2 years of our career, we were together at the same base, or same bases.
Do you still keep in contact with him?
No, I lost contact with him. I saw him again right after I got out of the Air Force, and lost contact with him. Haven't seen him since. Don't know where he's at.
How long were you in the Air Force?
4 years
Okay.
active and 2 years inactive.
Okay. So, how long was basic training?
About 6 weeks.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a choice of what your job was going to be in the Air Force?
No, I did not. I scored highest in administrative,
Mm-hmm.
but they put me in as a mechanic.
That's my kind of field. What kind of mechanic?
I was a hydraulic pneumatic specialist.
Okay. So when I hear you say that, to me you can work on a variety of things.
Yeah, I worked on the flight controls of airplanes, like the ailerons and the vertical, stabilizers and anything, any way to, where the airplane was really maneuvered by hydraulics.
Can you explain that to a person? Can you, in layman's terms, kind of explain that?
Well, an elevator or an aileron helps the airplane maneuver while it's in the air, and it has what we call actuators, which move the flight controls from one place to the other. Well, that's done by hydraulics. And so I made sure that the hydraulic system in the airplane was in tip-top shape, and there were no leaks or anything like that. That was my job.
Okay. Do you feel like you adjusted well to military life?
At first, I didn't.
No.
At first, it was very difficult because I didn't know what to expect, and adjusting to a comfort zone. But after about a year, I began to get used to it, and it began to become a comfort zone for me, and got used to it, and things were fine. In fact, I enjoyed it.
A year. Okay. How long was tech school?
It was 4.5 months.
Where was basic?
Basic was at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, San Antonio, Texas.
And tech school?
Tech school was at Chanute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois.
Okay, so all of these are big changes from California.
Yeah.
And they're not just big changes in weather, they're big changes in people.
Yeah.
And I can say that from experience.
I bet you can.
Because coming from California, where everybody's like, let's go hang, bro, and let's chill, to it's just the South is a different kind of way, the Midwest is a different kind of way. Was that an adjustment for you?
Yeah, meeting people from other states was an adjustment. You didn't know what to expect, and different people groups was because I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and so to meet people who were black or Asian or whatever was interesting to me.
What about the food?
The food was okay. I mean, people that are in other services, like the Marines, for example, they always say that people that were in the Air Force had the best food. Well, I can't agree with that wholeheartedly, really. The food was good in the Air Force. It was. It wasn't the best. It wasn't like a 5-star restaurant, but it was good. It was good.
I don't know if Army folk would agree with that statement, but
Because you're Army, yeah.
We'll believe you, because yeah. Okay, so start in California, you go to Texas, you go to Illinois. After Illinois, what's your first duty station?
My first duty station was in Phoenix, Arizona, at a base called Luke Air Force Base.
And now you're a little closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still going with your battle buddy from Knott's Berry Farm, right?
Yeah, we were still together. In fact, we would go home 2 or 3 times a month from Phoenix to LA together.
And that probably made your mother happy.
Yeah, it did. She eventually got used to it.
Okay. Tell me about your first duty station.
Well, it was like being at a job, really, because I was really close to home. It was a great duty station. It was a little hot during the summer because if I worked out on the flight line, and the sun is very hot. In fact, it was so hot during the summer that you could actually fry an egg on the wings of the airplane. It was that hot. Yeah.
Did you try?
Mm-hmm. It was a great experience. I don't really have much to say about it because it was so long ago, but it was an interesting job. I learned a lot. I tell you, what the Air Force did to me, because I never pursued the career that I was trained for, it built character in me. I often say to people, I said the airplanes worked more on me than I worked on them. So really what the Air Force was about me was character building. The test of your character is what it takes to stop you. And that's what the Air Force did to me. Helped me be a leader, build character in my life, learn how to be, to get a job done. Up until I went in the Air Force, I wasn't a guy that I would start a project and never finish it. The Air Force helped me to be able to see things through. You had to do it, and you had to get it done. You had to get the job done.
Like a 48-year marriage.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Okay, so when do you go to CCK? Is it during this
Well, I was stationed at Luke Air Force Base for about 2 years, and something really dynamic happened in my life that changed me completely.
Mm-hmm.
In this reunion that we're holding this week, I'm going to give a testimony of how the Air Force changed my life. Because, when you go into the military, you don't come out the same person that you were when you went in. It changes you. For some, it's unfortunate that it changes you for, it makes, in the wrong direction. But some of us, like myself, it changes you in the right direction. And that's what the Air Force did for me. Made me a leader. But something significant happened, and that was my spiritual life. I never, hardly ever went to church growing up. And about 2 years before I went in the Air Force, people started talking to me about going to church, about the Bible and all of that. And I became very interested in that because I knew, because one of the reasons I joined the Air Force was I wanted, everybody wants fulfillment in life. I wanted to be fulfilled, and I thought the Air Force would give me fulfillment, and it did to a certain point. But there was something still missing in my life. And so to make a long story short, I came to a saving knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. And I asked him to come into my life and save me, because I knew that man would live somewhere for eternity. Without going too deep into that, I just wanted to make sure that when I died, I'd go to heaven. And so I made a decision to receive Jesus Christ as my Savior. And when that happened, it changed my life. And it changed my Air Force career. Because up until that time, we all have trouble adjusting to a new life. And having a spiritual life, reading the Bible and praying and, starting to go to church and all of that really was dynamic in my life. So the two together, joining the Air Force and being part of that, that group, having, function and purpose and all of that was very, very helpful to me. But adding the spiritual life to it just put all the entire package together. So one week when I was driving home from Air Force Base, Luke Air Force Base on a leave, the Lord really got a hold of my heart, and I trusted him to be my Savior. I prayed to him, Lord, come into my life and save me. And he did that. And so when I got home that evening, I was telling a friend about it, and I asked a friend, I said, if I come home on next weekend, what church should I go to? Because I want to start going to church. And he recommended a church in Placentia, California, which was only a few miles away from where I grew up. And that church was really a great church, because that's where I met my wife. And that's where Jane and I met. And about a year and a half later, we were married. So she joined the Air Force with me, so to speak. So within a 9-day period, I trusted Christ as my Savior, not knowing, but I also met my wife, you know. And so I had the whole package, you know. I had a career, I had a relationship with the Lord, and I had a wife who I loved very much, who loved me very much. And after 48 years, we still have that, you know, same kind of relationship. And so those two things together is really what made the Air Force, for me, life-changing. But if I would have left one out, I would have been missing part of the puzzle. But having all those together just made my life worth living and being fulfilled. And so my whole attitude toward my career in the Air Force had changed. We had what we called in the Air Force a rating, called the APR. And my APR started going up, my work, my productivity and all of that started becoming better. I mean, my life changed. And then near the end of my career, about 13 or 14 months before I was to get out, I got stationed, actually a little bit longer than that actually. It was about maybe 18 months. I got orders to Davis-Monthan in Tucson. And thinking, and of course, during the time that I went from Luke to Davis-Monthan is when Jane and I got married, because I was on a 30-day leave, so we got married then. And I was thinking that, wow, hey, I'm going to go to Davis-Monthan, and I guess I'm going to spend the rest of my time, my career in the Air Force, in Arizona. About 6 months later, I got orders to CCK. And to go overseas, and we'd only been married about six months. So here we are, newly married, no children yet, and here am I, after 6 months, I'm going overseas to be away from my wife, and it just wasn't a good scenario. So I learned that CCK, Ching Chung Kong Air Base, was a unaccompanied tour, and what that meant is that you couldn't bring your family over with you. They wouldn't pay, you know, the Air Force wouldn't pay the way for your wife to get there or anything. But I did learn that even though it was an unaccompanied tour, I could, on my own expense, bring my wife over as long as I went through the proper channels of getting permission from the commander and all of that. So I went through those, you know, went through that red tape, got permission, and my wife and I were able to eventually join up together at CCK. And she spent about a year there. I was there for about 13 months. And something else significant happened to me during the time that I was at CCK. Other than, you know, my career continuing to grow, and, you know, I became a buck sergeant, E4. I began to learn from the Lord what He wanted me to do for the rest of my life. I knew that I did not want to stay a mechanic. You know, yeah, I did okay in that career field. If I would have stayed in the Air Force, most likely I probably would have changed my career, went into something different, more, you know, even though I enjoyed my job and it was fulfilling, I just wanted to do something different. And so outside the main gate of CCK was what they called a welcome in. And basically it was a Christian serviceman center for veterans, or for GIs back then. And so every night, my wife and I eventually attended that serviceman center. And the director of that serviceman center, his name was Earl Beagle, he's with the Lord now, eventually encouraged me and helped me to see what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so he encouraged me to go to Bible college. And so I eventually, make a long story short, when I got out of the Air Force, I got honorably discharged in March of 1973, just 6 weeks short of 4 years. I went to Bible college. I ended up going to a school called Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina. And so when I wrote home to tell my mom and dad about it, and my in-laws, they said, "Why do you want to go to a school so far away? Why don't you go to school here?" And they, even today, my in-laws can't understand that. But that's okay, because, why go to a school in South Carolina when you can go to a school in LA somewhere where it's closer to home? And that does make sense, Maybe I should have, considered that. But I knew God wanted me to go to the school in South Carolina. And that's why I made my decision to do that. So when I got out of the Air Force, I was 5 weeks later, we were in Greenville, South Carolina, getting ready to go to school in the fall. And again, it's a long story, but I ended up serving in the ministry for most of my life, up and even until now. My wife and I currently serve as police chaplains. We started out 16 years ago serving with a city by the name of Pomona. You may know where Pomona is. So we served with their department, Pomona Police Department. And then eventually, a few months ago, we decided that we would try to get try to serve with the police department, but try to get closer to home. So we transferred what they call in law enforcement terminology, they call it a lateral. And so we lateraled over from Pomona to Santa Ana PD, and we've been serving there for the last couple of months, actually the last 3 months. And it's a great opportunity to be able to serve with police officers. I often say that, police officers have our back. They protect us. They serve us, But who has their back? The chaplains should have their back. And that's where we serve. We have their back. We do ride-alongs, we do death notices, we help families get through their toughest times of their life, And we've been doing that for 16 years. It's quite fulfilling. So I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for my time in the Air Force. That's my story.
Fantastic. Can I ask a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay. How old were you when you were in the car and had the I'm going to ask Jesus into my life, God, and how old were you when you had that revelation?
I was 19. No, I'm sorry, I was 20.
How old were you when you married Jane?
I was 21, barely 21.
And when you stepped foot onto CCK?
I was 22.
When you got out of the military?
I was 23. Boom, 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 yeah.
Okay. When you went to South Carolina, did you use a GI Bill or some form
Yes,
of...
I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the GI Bill got me through school. It didn't pay for everything, but it certainly paid for a lot of it.
So I'm assuming that Jane went to school at the same time as you did.
Yes, she did.
Did Jane have any prior education?
No. Well, she went through junior college for a year and a half.
Okay. Did the GI Bill pick up her tab?
No.
Okay. How long was chaplain school? I think you said, but remind me.
Yeah, actually, I went through an associate's degree in Bible,
Okay.
and later on went through a 4-year degree. So I actually have 7 years under my belt for education for the ministry. I don't have a master's. I do have a BA and associate's degree.
Okay. Sounds great. Sounds like you know the Lord. Where did you, so when you, I guess, South Carolina, how long did you stay there?
Well, after I graduated, we wanted to go back to Taiwan. We had such a great experience there.
You're just missing big chunks. You're just jumping over stuff. Come on, tell me about it. Tell me.
And so we had to raise our own support. And we didn't know if we were going to be in Taiwan for the rest of our lives as missionaries or not. We had no idea. But we at least wanted to move in that direction. We felt led of the Lord maybe go back there for a short term or long term. We didn't know. So we got back there, and I raised support. I don't know, I think I preached in over 150 churches to raise support to go over there. And I was in churches all over Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida and South Carolina, a few out in California. But eventually by the way, when I was at CCK, I left out part of the story.
You left a lot out of CCK. We're going to come back to that.
Oh, we are? Okay, I'll just hold off on that then.
No, tell me.
While we were at CCK, they had a base hospital there. But they had a hospital. They didn't have the facilities for wives to have children.
Now, the hospital was for military or for civilians or both?
It was for military only.
Okay.
So anyway, go ahead. My wife got pregnant, and it got near for her to have the baby. And we found out that she wasn't, well, after she got pregnant, we found out that she couldn't have the baby on the base. And that 30 days before the due date, that she was to be flown up to Taipei, which is about a 4-hour drive, and wait out those 30 days and have the baby in Taipei, or Taipei. And that's what happened. 30 days before the due date, they flew her up there on a C-9.
Not the most comfortable plane.
Excuse me?
Is that the most comfortable plane?
No, but it wasn't a military plane. It was just a C-9 is like a DC-7 or no, a DC-9 or something like that. I'm not sure. A small plane, and they flew her up there. And for 30 days, she waited out until she had the baby. And so we had our first child in Taiwan while I was stationed at CCK. And that was an experience. I would go up on the weekends to see her and spend time with her, and then get back on Monday morning to go to work at the base. I did that for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then she finally had the baby, and then she flew back to CCK or Taichung, where we were living. And of course, we had great help from those that were at the Servicemen Center too, because we were there 2 or 3 nights a week. And it was, it worked out okay, And anyway, getting back to when we went back the second time, we ended up having our third child not at CCK, but in Taiwan, at a little town called, which is probably huge today, called Zhonghua. And that's where we had our third child. Our second child, Timothy, our third child is Nathan. Our first was Charmaine. Our second child we had in Greenville, South Carolina, while I was going to school.
Okay. So you wanted to go back to Taiwan to preach the gospel?
Yeah, to become missionaries.
Okay.
And we ended up learning the language, partially anyway, and ended up being there for, 2.5 years, and decided that we didn't want to spend the rest of our lives there. It was a great experience. We learned a great deal. Our kids learned a great deal. So we went back to the States, and I ended up becoming an assistant pastor at a church in the same city where I went to Bible college.
So you returned to South Carolina when you came back?
Yeah.
Okay. And any more children?
No, just 3.
Just 3? Okay.
I think that's enough.
You hit me with a lot there.
Did I really?
You didn't mention any children. We just moved and moved moved. But then now suddenly we had a kid our first year in what was a combat zone. So.
Well, CCK was a support base for the Vietnam War.
I know what CCK was, but there was a lot happening there. True?
Well, we had C-130s flying back and forth to Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia. And sometimes they would come back, with
a little tattered and torn.
Yeah. And so our job was to repair them. So I never went to Vietnam, never went to Cambodia or any of those places. I just stayed right there doing my job.
Were there any other wives there?
Yeah, there were.
any other American wives?
Yes, there were.
Okay, so there were other, and so did they form any wives clubs, or was there a USO present? Did they make one?
There was a USO, but we were so involved in the Welcome In, the Christian Serviceman Center, we just really didn't have time to do anything else but that.
Okay, so can you tell me about this Welcome In Center, because I've never heard about that before.
It was a place, it was a home away from home.
Uh-huh.
The directors, Earl and Barb Beagle, had home cooked meals every night. I mean, if we want to go out to a restaurant and have good Chinese food, because Chinese food in Taiwan is great, but if you wanted a good home cooked American meal, and believe me, sometimes you did, even down to a peanut butter sandwich, you went to the Serviceman Center to get that.
I heard those were a delicacy.
Huh?
I heard a peanut butter sandwich was a delicacy.
Well, you kind of miss that kind of stuff,
Okay.
you know?
Okay.
And so not every night, but probably 3 nights a week, we would be over there, and then after the meal, there would be a Bible study going on, so we got involved in that. And in fact, the Serviceman Center really became our church, even though it wasn't classified specifically as a church. Just a home away from home.
Okay. And how many servicemen would you say, like how big was the congregation, so to speak?
There were probably about 30 veterans or GIs that came in on a regular basis every night.
With family or single?
Some were able to bring over their wives like I did. In fact, there'll be 3 or 2 families here today that were there too. So if you interview them, you're going to get a similar story.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I'd like to hear more about your day-to-day work at CCK. Can you tell me what an average day looked like? And I'd like to hear too. I'd like to hear what it was like before the baby and then after the baby, because this is good stuff. I think our listeners need to hear about it. So, what time would you wake up? How long were your hours?
Well, I worked 8 to 10 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Near the end, when the Vietnam War was closing, when things were beginning to wind up a little bit, we were working 12-hour days. And I would either be out on the flight line repairing airplanes or hydraulic leaks, or I would be in the phase docks doing phases on the C-130s.
How did you guys get parts? Was your supply good? Was it ever a challenge to do your job?
No, not really. Everything was just right there.
It just...
Yeah, if I needed a part, if I needed hydraulic fluid, whatever I needed, it was always there. I can't remember ever not having what we needed to repair the airplanes. They were there. We were well supplied.
Let me tell you, the Air Force must have it nice.
Well, you got C-130s flying in and out of the country all the time, and they got to haul something. They might as well haul their equipment. I guess that's what they did. I never paid much attention to what they hauled. Sometimes they would come back really, really dirty, but I don't know.
Whose job was it to wash the planes?
They had a place called the wash racks, and they would pull the airplane up to those, and
You don't know.
I wasn't involved in that. No.
You just fixed stuff and went home to your wife.
That's right.
Okay. Simple man.
Yeah, I remember when I got out of the Air Force, the grease in my hands, it was so impacted that it took me 6 months to clean my hands.
Mm.
For that grease to wear out. And we worked hard. We did. But I never complained. It was just a job that had to be done. Again, the test of your character is what it takes to stop you, and the Air Force taught me that.
Have any of your children joined the service?
No.
Okay. In your 2 years inactive, did you ever get a call back or a little scare or
Not really, because the Vietnam War was, I got out in '73. The Vietnam War closed in '75, and people were getting out all the time because there was no need to have that many in the military.
Have you used any of your other VA benefits? House loan, business loans?
No, the only thing I ever used was the VA and the VA healthcare. I know the VA healthcare gets a bad rap a lot of times, that they don't take care of the veterans. I've found that not to be true. Yeah, you can't find the perfect healthcare facility, but I think overall the VA does a pretty good job for their veterans. At least that's been my experience.
Mine too.
It all depends upon attitude. Your attitude is so important, because if you go in there with, poor me and negative and all of that, you're going to be treated that way. I've always learned over the years that, you treat people the way you want to be treated. And that even comes down to the VA. I think people help me more with the VA because maybe I try to have a positive attitude. I think that's so important in life. I don't mean to get into philosophy, but that's the kind of life I've tried to live. I've always wanted, and that's why we did this reunion. I mean, CCK has never had a reunion. And when we were here back in October and we saw a reunion was going on over at the museum, I was talking to my wife. I said, honey, maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to have a reunion. Bring these guys back together again.
Hi, we're just taking in for just a minute.
Okay, so are you a part of any other veterans organizations besides CCK?
Disabled Veterans of America, the DAV,
Uh-huh.
part of them.
Okay. That's fantastic. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war in the military in general?
There'll always be war. I'm a student of the Bible, and war's always been around. I mean, you read your Old Testament, what do you find? You find war. It's always, as long as men have evil hearts, we're going to have war. But the day's going to come when all that's going to be eliminated, and the 1,000-year reign of Christ will be ushered in, and there'll be a 1,000-year reign of Him bringing peace to the earth. War is inevitable. One day, war will be no more, as the Bible says. And I look forward to that day.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
I had about 2.5 years ago, I had an experience that was life-threatening. And, working as a police chaplain, I do ride-alongs, ride with police officers, and, get involved in what they do, and, a lot comes with that. I could spend a whole hour just on talking to you about that. But one day I went out on a ride-along, and it was a 10-hour time. By the way, when I do ride-alongs, I don't sit in the back seat, I sit in the front seat. And there's a reason for that. When you sit in the back seat, usually you've been arrested.
And you can't get out.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe you don't really understand that.
I've done the ride-along before.
And anyway, the ride-along that particular day, again, I'm not blaming anybody for this. There's always a reason. Romans 8:28 says, all things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. So I go out on this 10-hour ride-along, and most of our calls were to the homeless. Nothing wrong with the homeless. I mean, I'm glad I'm not one. I mean, we all could be there. But we do have quite a homeless population in California. And 2 weeks after that ride along, I got really, really sick. Came down with a fungal infection. And again, I don't know, I'm not blaming anybody for this, but I think I might have caught something from someone that was homeless. No fault of theirs. It just comes with the territory when you're out with the public like that. And I ended up getting really, really sick, and I was in the hospital for 3 months. And 2 of those months I don't even remember. And I almost died.
So sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Lost, went from 165, which is what I'm about now, down to 135. Lost a lot of weight. And my wife thought she was going to lose me. And after about 2 months, I started recovering, started getting better. Eventually, I was able to get out and recover. It took me about a year after I got out of the hospital to get my weight back. And I'm still, you never really totally recover from that. And I've always thought to myself, Lord, why did you allow me to go through that terrible time? I mean, I was so sick. I even asked the Lord, just take me home. Because I knew that, the Bible promises that if you accept Christ as your Savior, and when you die, you're going to go to heaven. Not hope, you have that assurance. And I had that. And so, as I was through that, I was asking the Lord, well, why is it that you allowed me to go through such a low period of my life? And I've concluded to be this. If you're going to help people who are going through low periods of their life, heartache, and we've seen our share of it, how are you going to be able to help people who are suffering heartache if you haven't suffered it yourself? And I did suffer that. And I figured that that's the reason why the Lord allowed me to go through that. It's made me more compassionate toward people who are suffering. And it was life-changing. Because we've all been sick from time to time, but not that sick. And it was, like I said, it was life-changing. And so anyway, we had one of our officers was terribly hurt he was a motor officer, which means he drives a motorcycle, That's what they call a motor officer. And he was hit by a vehicle and had a terrible head injury. And I remember when we were called out by the PD to go to the hospital to visit him, that we did not know he was going to make it. And his mother was there. He married, I think he had one child. And so I began to talk to his mom about what happened to me. I said, we need to really involve the Lord into this, because if you want your son to live and go back to work and live a normal life like he did before the accident, we really do need to pray. And then I went on this to tell her what happened to me. And he did recover. And about 6 months later, after he was recovering, I got a nice letter from her. He said, your testimony about what happened to you really helped me and encouraged me to get through those tough times with my son when we didn't know how the outcome was going to be. And I figured, Lord, you know what you're doing. All things do work together for good to them who love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. And it all kind of comes together, and you realize that's what I'm supposed to do in life. And if I'm supposed to do that in life, I need to suffer heartache myself. And that ties it up. I don't know if I can add anything to that.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing it with us. Okay, I have one last question for you before I let you go for the day. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will see and or hear this video?
The most important thing in your life is your relationship with the Lord. And if you don't have a relationship with Him, then I encourage you to begin to search and see how you can have a relationship with the Lord as I do. That's the most important thing in life. The Bible says, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. What is our purpose in life? Our purpose is to glorify God. And if our purpose is to glorify God, we need to have a relationship with Him to do that. And if you don't have that kind of relationship, I encourage you, by His mercies and by His grace, to be able to have that kind of relationship where you can talk to Him freely, where He's there. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. You know the word. That would be my encouragement. Yeah.
That concludes our interview with Robert Kellar. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your military service.